You begin to honestly start thinking more about the employee and telling them that truthfully, this might not be the right place for them to work. So you really start worrying about the career of that employee, and you distance yourself from the company because you don't feel comfortable with the company anymore. You can't trust them.
I'm Angela Connor, and this is Now Look Inward. Now Look Inward is a challenge to corporate America to sweep around its own front door, get its house in order, and make Black voices and contributions matter inside their organizations. Raising consciousness is a path forward, and practicing what you preach is a must. It's time to do the real work. Welcome to episode 1 of Now Look Inward. Today we are here with a special guest. I will not reveal her name nor the company that she has worked for, but she has some really great stories to tell, and I'm hoping to have an interesting conversation with her today. Welcome, woman who shall not be named.
Thank you.
Well, you have worked at a huge corporation. You were there in an HR capacity for about 20 years, so you understand fully some of what microaggressions can do in the workplace. I mean, you've been a representative of not only the employees, but also the managers and the owners of a company. And just as we talk about microaggressions, tell me a little bit about some that you may have helped employees with, or some of the stories that African-American employees in particular have come to you and talked about in terms of what they've experienced in the workplace.
I had experiences where employees felt like they weren't promoted as they should be, or they had did the work and the work wasn't being recognized. For an example, if they had not been promoted, that they weren't given the performance appraisal to say that, okay, you should correct this behavior or this needs to be done in a certain way. It was always, you're just not ready. And they would ask the question, well, what do I have to do to get ready? And there was never really a solid answer.
So let's talk about that, the idea of you just not being ready. Is that something as an HR professional that you have seen said to African Americans more than whites per se?
I would say in that particular industry, yes. The makeup, though, interestingly enough, it was more African Americans that were on the employee level, and more, or white Americans or white males that were in management positions. So it seemed to be that was more common, that they weren't ready.
So was there ever a growth path? Was there a plan? How do you get ready? Because it's one thing to tell someone they're not ready. And I have heard this, and I've even witnessed this in some places where I've worked, where, African Americans were told they weren't ready, but weren't really given a path. Is that an excuse?
No, it's not an excuse. And as much as I would push to say, okay, what is the path? What do they need to do? Then they might get something, but it was really abstract and there was no follow up. There was no sit down conversation to say, this is what you need to do, or to follow up to say, okay, you've done this and you need to adjust. It was thrown out. Sometimes it felt like just to appease. And if it was given, then it felt like that it wasn't specific enough for them to actually achieve it.
So in some instances, people just give up. So they think, this is not a place for me. I don't belong. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you've seen instances where that probably was the case?
Oh, absolutely. They would give up and leave, or they would give up and stay. And they ended up not performing. Then they began to be thought of as this C player, if you will. That was a D player, what have you. That was kind of a term that had been adopted, that this person was an A player, but this person wasn't. They were a C player.
So in your roles, again, you represented the employee, but also the managers. Mm-hmm. What kind of situations, or is there something you can share in terms of how you've had to help a manager when maybe you knew that they weren't right, or you felt that maybe the employee had experienced something awful, but you have to help the manager.
Mm-hmm. I would constantly have to have conversations where I would pull the manager in and just say, you know what, this person has done the work. They've been here. They've done everything that you've asked them to do. You've given them these performance appraisals, however abstract they might be, and they've tried to achieve them. So you really do need to look at what this person is doing. And honestly, sometimes it would work, and then sometimes it was an excuse where it didn't work.
How does this type of behavior weigh on an HR professional?
It weighs heavily because you are literally torn. You have a job to do, and it's like you're there to, of course, to work with the actual employee or be that employee liaison, but you still, in those cases, report to those managers. So it's like you have to figure out how to, fortunately, appease both parties. So it was difficult. You constantly feel like you are walking a tightrope because you want to make sure that the employee needs are met, but you also do have a management team that, is expecting you to do your job as well.
So when you see disparities between African Americans and whites as an HR professional, how do you bring that to the management, or do you?
You do. You definitely do. But it was always met with, no, that couldn't be the case. No, we do this, or no, we do that. And then always brought, well, so-and-so, do you remember they're always late? Or so-and-so, do you remember that they did not do that task as asked? So it was always countered with something else.
So that speaks to some of the defensiveness that we hear about. You bring an issue to light and then you're told it isn't real. Mm-hmm. So what does that do to you as a human being, as a Black woman? You know something's real. You're trying to be an advocate for employees, but you're getting pushed back.
Mm-hmm. You begin to honestly start thinking more about the employee and telling them that truthfully, this might not be the right place for them to work. So you really start worrying about the career of that employee, and you distance yourself from the company because you don't feel comfortable with the company anymore. You can't trust them. So you really, as an HR manager, you love your employee. You're there for your employee to make sure that their career path or their well-being is what it needs to be, that, that they're happy. So you start saying, you know what, this might not be the right place for you to work. Take your talents here or really hone in on your skill set, and maybe it's time for you to do something different. And it's terrible to say, but many of us have done that.
Wow, you have said a lot right there. So as the HR leader who wants to have the best possible talent, you're telling me that you have had to tell people you may need to take your talents elsewhere because it's just not going to work for you here?
Yes.
Wow. I hope that everyone is hearing that and really digest that. An HR professional is saying that she has told people to leave because she knows that the people she's working for, or that they're both working for, are not going to do right by these people. Does this have to be our future? I mean, how can this change?
Really by having open dialogue, by really opening our eyes and having real conversations. So having real conversations with people to see how they feel, to really look at yourself, and to have a little bit of self-awareness, because a lot of this stuff, I'm going to say, is self-denial. It's like you don't want to believe it, and you don't want to believe it on both parts. Because, in my situation, I had the privilege of working with people, employees that had been in their position for years. So it was a family for them. So they didn't want to believe somewhere where they came and invested their time and invested their energy where that they weren't fully being accepted, that their work wasn't being appreciated. So it became almost like a bit of an abusive relationship. It's like, I'm coming here, you're a part of where I spend my time, where I invest my energy, and I have this family, but I'm still not being treated well. But I know I need to go, but I can't go. And then you have this other bit of the organization that's not treating you right, not seeing you, not seeing your whole self, but yet it's like, they feel like they're doing right by you because you have great benefits, or because, they give you that occasional pat on the back. But no one really operates in a real place of self-awareness to say, this is not right. I'm not being treated well, or, I'm not treating them well.
Wow. a lot of mistreatment happening in the workplace that some of us just accept for various reasons. Like you said, I've got good benefits. They treat me okay in this aspect, but maybe not another.
Exactly. It's like we learn to trade off things, what's important to us. So, and you become accepting.
Wow. Well, this is the type of conversation that we need to keep having. And I want to thank you for spending time with me today talking about this. And I hope that you will come back. Thank you for allowing me to chat with you. And I really appreciate you being anonymous. And I definitely understand why you would want that. But again, let me just thank you for spending time here and contributing to Now Look Inward. Our goal here is to educate corporate America. And I think you've helped us do that.
Thanks, Angela, for having me.
If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast or getting involved in any way, please send an email to angela@changeagentcommunications.com. This podcast is recorded at Triangle Podcast Studio in Cary, North Carolina. For more information, visit trianglepodcaststudio.com.